Again, and welcome back to the Slow Flowers Show with Debra Prinzing. This is episode 587. Today, I want to share a bonus episode with you, an updated lecture that I originally created and presented for the FREESIA Summit. The FREESIA Summit is an acronym for Florists Recognizing Environmental and Eco-Sustainable Ideas and Applications, and it was produced by Hitomi Gilliam and Colin Gilliam as an online conference this past September. So this episode is called Walking the Talk, Unpacking the Slow Flowers Manifesto, and Putting Our 6 Values into Practice for Your Floral Enterprise. I want to examine all of our Slow Flowers values and concepts and discuss how our members are putting them into practice. In this episode, I'll introduce you to several of our members and highlight their stories. You can have all the theory you want, but implementing these values is what will help you build a sustainable brand for your business. Let's go ahead and get started, and I'll share our sponsor thank yous at the end. I first started writing about slow flowers more than 10 years ago, coining the phrase slow flowers as a way to explain the what I was seeing and reporting in domestic floral agriculture and sustainable floristry. And as you can see on the left, this is how I defined what the term slow flowers reflects. It really is and was and continues to be a cultural shift. During one of the open chat sessions at the FREESIA Summit, there was an audience member who actually commented, "We have to find a network of like-minded professionals to gather together and support our work." And I had to pause and say to her, that's what Slow Flowers is. That's our laser-focused mission. Specifically, the Slow Flowers movement has two audiences. We have the floral industry and we have consumers. And really, our message is constantly talking about the benefits of local, seasonal, and domestic flowers. And we want to influence floral buying practices of both groups. Oops. Some people say, is it mainstream yet? This shot is a graphic from Keyhole, which is a social media tracker. And in 365 days, the hashtag Slow Flowers created 67 million social media impressions, and that was worldwide. So I believe it is now being used to really communicate and convey the idea of sustainability in the floral industry. Our members use the Slow Flowers affiliation to elevate and amplify their branding and marketing. They use it to telegraph to their customers and clients what their business is all about. An important model for the slow flowers movement is the slow food movement. Many of you know about slow food. It's a phenomenal organization founded in 1986 by Carlo Petrini in Italy. It's an organization that was started to promote local food and traditional cooking and really became the symbol of anti-fast food as a response to what was happening elsewhere in the culinary world. We just took similar inspiration, shining a light on what has happened over the past 3 decades in the floral marketplace. Yes, I blatantly borrowed the slow concept and added the word flowers to it. Slow food has a manifesto, and so I thought it would be fitting if slow flowers had one too. I wrote ours in 2017. You can see it here on the screen. And I wrote it as a call to action to help our members define the spirit of their work and their own mission. So let's talk about the 6 values that are featured in the Slow Flowers Manifesto. And I'll break them down by theme and by what our members are doing to really reflect those values. Our first value is to recognize and respect the seasons by celebrating and designing with flowers when they naturally bloom. As a guiding principle, we are influenced by what we see in the slow food movement, where people are saying to really celebrate flavor and enjoy the best food available is to eat in season. The strawberry's lack of flavor in January is a frequent example given. But if you get it right off the vine or right off the plant in the middle of summer, there's nothing more pure as the essence of season on your taste buds. Similarly, we see this in the flower world. I think it's universal and relatable to gardeners as well. Since I come out of the gardening world as a writer, I was immediately drawn to this concept. During the pandemic, we saw something like 23 million new people entering gardening during the shutdown. So, having conversations about seasonality is important because people are understanding their need to connect to nature more than ever. And that is obviously what flowers do in our world. Slow flowers really did start with my books. I wrote a book called The 50 Mile Bouquet in 2012, and I used the phrase slow flowers throughout that book, kind of as a shorthand to explain to people what the topic was about. Just to give you a quick recap of the Slow Flowers book, published the following year in 2013, I set out to create a bouquet, one bouquet each week from my cutting garden in Seattle using what was seasonal. It was an experiment when I made these arrangements to say, you know what? There's a dormant season in winter. It's quieter. My palette might be twigs and conifers. Can I create something that I find aesthetically pleasing as an expression of the current season with as much excitement brought to the peak of summer as to the quiet months of winter? And I did. The Slow Flowers book stimulated wonderful responses. There was even a Slow Flowers challenge in 2014 that started when one of my readers took it upon herself to use the hashtag the Slow Flowers Challenge and share it on social media, asking other gardeners to join her. And we took it upon ourselves to create an opportunity for everybody to post and share their seasonal flowers. It was flower lovers, gardeners, florists, all creating an arrangement every week and posting and sharing what they had created. And that movement really exploded among gardeners. We started seeing much more participation as a result from both farmers and florists as well. So when I was presenting lectures and presentations at flower shows and garden clubs and other venues, I kept hearing from audiences who would say, okay, Deborah, I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I believe in what you're talking about, but how do I find farmers and florists who are sourcing locally? I was asked the same question by my peers and others in the media who were interested in the renaissance that was taking place in the floral world. As a result, I launched slowflowers.com in 2014 and began to highlight the local and regional sources available for local flowers. This slide shows just one member who joined the Slow Flowers movement and was listed very early on slowflowers.com. Beth Cyphers is a farmer florist based in Salem, Oregon, and she owns the Crowley House Flower Farm, specializing in growing garden roses, among other amazing crops for the floral trade. I was really fortunate at the very beginning of this journey to partner with local flower farmers in the Pacific Northwest, including those who formed the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market in 2011. I like to say I was their embedded journalist. The farmers of the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market are focused on bringing premium couture flowers to the florists of this region. They're able to differentiate local flowers from imported flowers and even commercially grown flowers. The secret of their success really has been to specialize in flowers that can't be shipped or flowers that are so precious and only bloom for a small period of time. And that's a lot like, brings to mind these beautiful lilacs, which are grown by Jello Mold Farm in Skagit Valley in Mount Vernon, Washington. And by the way, Jello Mold Farm is the farm on the cover of the 50 Mile Bouquet. Partnering with the growers market and its farmers allowed me to focus people's attention on the special features of these flowers and especially their locality. As the natural evolution of featuring flower farmers led me to connect with their customers, who are the florists. And florists like Melissa Fevier of Terabella Flowers, which is also based in Seattle. Melissa really highlights seasonal flowers in her shop, and she educates her customers about her farming sources as part of her own branding. In fact, Melissa was a founding member of the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, the only florist to join with the growers in launching the co-op. This graphic you see here of Melissa in her shop has a little insert, and it's one of her Instagram posts, support local growers. And as she shared her philosophy, of course, other florists responded in this marketplace and elsewhere in the US. Similarly, Tammy Myers of First in Bloom specializes in locally grown and American grown everyday flowers with the tagline, From America with Love. Melissa and Tammy are among 850 florists and flower farmers, farmer florists, retailers, wholesalers, and designers who are Slow Flower Society practitioners. I just want to update this slide because First in Bloom is rebranding for 2023 with the Eco Florist tagline. After 9 years in business, Tammy's mission hasn't changed, it's just expanded. So clearly, we all can see the benefits of supporting local flowers, which is our first mandate. In the past decade, especially as we've been gathering this community of flower farmers and floral designers, consumers and floral enthusiasts alike, each of whom views their floral purchases in the same way they spend their food dollars, there's a term emerging that's called the flower dollar. These concepts inform value number 2, which is really all about the transportation footprint with the goal of sourcing our flowers as close to home as possible. Now in North America, that's obviously a challenge because many of areas have winter weather conditions. And so that's where we can rely on flowers from warmer states like Hawaii, California, Florida, or even Oregon and Washington. But local is clearly the value that segues into this issue of the flower transportation conversation. We wanted to know what consumers understood about the correlation between where their flowers are grown and how they are purchased. There hasn't been a baseline understanding of consumer attitudes and behaviors for a long time in terms of understanding their concern about local. The California Cut Flower Commission conducted a national survey in 2013 or 2014 asking consumers, do you know where your flowers come from? And if given a choice, would you choose California grown flowers? So that was the model that inspired me in 2021 to partner with the National Gardening Association, which does a scientifically accurate survey of 2,500 households across the US, asking them about lawn and garden trends and purchases and behaviors. We added some flower questions. We asked, how important is it to you that the flowers you purchase are locally grown? In 2022, 65% said it is very or somewhat important, and that is up from 58% in 2021. This is very encouraging. We're going to keep asking this question and measuring how the trend line is going with our third survey in 2023. We asked a second question, how important is it to you to buy US grown cut flowers? The response was not quite as high as the question around local, but it's still impressive, with 61% of respondents saying it is very or somewhat important that the flowers they buy are US grown, and that's up from 57% in 2021. The National Gardening Survey is consumer focused, and so we also survey Slow Flowers members every year on issues and concerns that relate to their businesses. As I mentioned earlier, our members include flower farmers, florists, studio and wedding and event designers, retail florists, and also people who define themselves as farmer florists and wholesalers and suppliers. So this past year, we asked, what type of local support are you currently experiencing? It was sort of like a temperature check among our members. And you'll note on this graph, 89% of our respondents said that more customers are interested in their floral enterprise because it's local. 45% said more customers are requesting locally grown flowers for their designs. So that's really affirming and in alignment with the National Gardening Survey numbers that I just showed you. Let's talk about some of the things that we're seeing in the context of the transportation footprint. This sign is an old-fashioned definition. I found this on a shop in Chicago years ago. Unfortunately, the shop had closed, but the sign lasted. And it shows the original dictionary definition of florist. which is one who is in the business of raising or selling flowers and ornamental plants. It's a concept that's having a comeback because of the slow flowers movement and interest in locally grown flowers. So we asked our members, what percentage of the flowers used in your designs do you grow yourself? We asked this question 1 year ago, and we asked it again for our survey that just closed. A very large percentage in 2022, 55%, said that they grow 76 to 100% of the flowers used in their own designs. You can tell that we have a lot of farmer florists among our membership. You can see this range of percentages with only about 10% of our respondents saying that they don't grow any of their own flowers. As an extension, we asked, how important is it to you and your business to purchase US made products for use in your floral designs? This relates more to the whole issue of hard goods and accessories. A year ago, we hadn't quite felt the pinch of the constraints of the US supply chain or the global supply chain. Now we're seeing more focus on reusing vases, recycling, and repurposing in response to that. We're also seeing innovation in this category. I just want to mention one interesting example of one way to address supply shortages. Tammy Myers of First in Bloom, who I mentioned in the first section, is a Seattle florist who partnered with an organization here in Seattle called Ridwell. Ridwell is a private recycling company that takes items that municipalities don't have recycling methods for, including things like light bulbs and batteries and plastic bags. With them, Tammy created a pilot project to collect recycled glass vases, the kind of things that homeowners have collected under their sinks or in cupboards. I believe they ran this project just in 2 neighborhoods with an overwhelming response. Tammy has since created vase collections of these recycled vessels, sorting them by shape and size from bud vases to centerpiece size vases. And now she's reselling them at an affordable rate to cover her costs and provide supply to local florists who need a regular quantity of vases and who have had trouble sourcing them. So we'll be following this story as it unfolds. It's encouraging to see how one person has diverted used glass vases from local landfills. To understand local, I also wanted to emphasize the sourcing and how we procure flowers. And that goes back to the farm and the wholesaler. What does local mean? Some of the things that people would consider local are in the left column. I like to look at it as the pebble in the pond approach, with the goal of sourcing as close to home as possible. When I wrote the 50-mile bouquet, I was very much inspired by the food miles. So I started my own cutting garden, and I like to call that my 5-step bouquet because it's located right outside my back door. Major wholesalers are responding to florist requests for local and American-grown flowers more than ever. This is a poster that Mayesh Wholesale Florist has in their Portland branch, and they've used it on some of their sponsorship branding for things that they've done with us at Slow Flowers. I love that they're highlighting local and American-grown flowers. We know, good or bad, that grocery accounts for 50% of all floral sales, and grocery customers want locally grown flowers. It's a convenience factor. These are some images from Central Market and Town and Country Markets. It's a family-owned chain in the Seattle area with 6 stores, and they are Slow Flowers members. Every year, they do a special promotion during American Flowers Week, highlighting their local flower farms across all their floral departments, which of course we love to see. At Whole Foods, certainly before their Amazon ownership, and even now, region by region, Whole Foods is partners with local farmers. These are images from the Fresh Herb Company, owned by Chet and Christy Anderson in Boulder, Colorado. They supply all of the Whole Foods in the Rocky Mountain region. Their program is so big, they're only delivering flowers to the distribution center, and then Whole Foods continues on with deliveries to something like 12 or 15 stores across the Rocky Mountain region. Individual stores also, kind of on a case-by-case basis and a region-by-region basis, partner with flower farms for hyper-local flowers. The flowers in this slide are grown by the Williams family of Wilmore Farms in Metter, Georgia. They're Slow Flowers members. They supply one Whole Foods outlet in Savannah, Georgia. You can see how important it is to support local flower farmers with in-store signage, both in point of purchase sale signage, but also on labels of their bunches and bouquets. We really know that people are asking for local flowers, and they define local flowers or the idea of local on their own terms. There are some excellent examples, and increasingly, if you put in the work, you can find local flowers everywhere. The term local is a rather elusive term, and there's a big question about how it's defined. We researched whether there was a U.S. government definition of local. This is the language from USDA in the Consolidated Farm and Rural Development Act, which defines local as the distance between the location where a product is produced and where it is consumed, which is 400 miles or less to be considered local, or in the state in which the product is produced. So in large states like Texas or California, local would be certainly more than 400 miles distance, but in smaller states, it would still be considered local because that's a guide for one specific region. I use this as a point of reference when I'm trying to look at my floral purchases. Okay, value number 3. When we see florists including local, when we see florists who include local messaging in their branding, we know it really captures the imagination of clients who care about how their money is spent. By supporting farmers, small and large, when we credit them, it helps everyone who's in the business of selling domestic and local flowers. This is very much about transparency in labeling. When people join Slow Flower Society as members, we say to them, you don't have to be 100% local or domestic in your sourcing. You just have to be willing to be transparent with consumers. If someone asks you for local flowers in a particular category, for example, and you can't supply them because you only have imported flowers in that category, we recommend you just be honest and tell them. Offer them a substitute that is local or American grown. We've all seen every piece of fruit or every vegetable at the grocery store with a little sticker that shares the origin of the country from which it comes. I know that some wholesalers have been hesitant to identify the origin of their flowers for fear that florists will, do an end run and try to buy farm direct. And at Slow Flowers, we're trying to alleviate these concerns through education by encouraging flower farmers to develop relationships and partner with wholesalers. With strong farmers, the equation benefits us all. What makes it all possible to have local and seasonal flowers really is the growth of flower farming as a viable economic enterprise in agriculture. This group of farmers at the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, as I said, are the people I've worked with the most closely in the last decade, and I'll introduce you to a few of them. On the left, please meet Gonzalo Ojeda. He owns Ojeda Farms in Ethel, Washington, and he supplies both the Seattle and the Portland farmer-owned wholesale markets. The slide on the right is showing the peak of Lisianthus season at Everyday Flowers in Stanwood, Washington, where Vivian Larson raises Lizzies in high tunnels. Gonzalo and Vivian are two people who I really admire. They're superb growers, and they are focused on growing specifically for florists. Regional flower hubs like the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market have influenced a huge explosion of similar models across the continent. We can see that in this slide featuring collectives, cooperatives, and other marketing networks. Inspired by the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, regional hubs are popping up and farmers are becoming their own wholesale operations to sell direct to florists. The slide on the top right is a webinar that we produced with Johnny Seeds last year, and it's available for free to watch on their website. I'll share the link in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com. Every single week, I receive an inquiry from someone who wants resources on how to start their own collective in their region, perhaps with as few as 3 flower farmers coming together with a central location to sell their flowers. It's really encouraging. There are also new online selling platforms emerging to help flower farmers with technology, such as Gather Flora and Rooted Farmers. Gather Flora is out of the West Coast in California. Rooted Farmers is based in New England on the East Coast. Each of these models has a unique proprietary software program created by people who saw a need for an app type of platform for farmers to load all their inventory and making it easy for florists to buy from multiple farms at once. So this is a real connection, actually a missing link that hadn't been available to farmers or florists prior to the last few years. When I started slowflowers.com, I envisioned that Slow Flowers would be a tool to help consumers and florists find flower farmers. But I'm not an e commerce expert, and I never wanted to do transactions through our site. So I'm grateful that these companies have emerged, and I really applaud these groups that are coming together to solve the pain point to help flower farmers sell their product professionally to florists. I mentioned earlier that florists are basing their brands on local sourcing. Here's just one florist who I want to highlight. Pilar Zuniga is based in the Oakland area. Her online shop is called Gorgeous and Green, and her online store offers local flowers as a highlighted product. Not only do I think that this is really important for everyone to do, but I also am inspired when I see florists featuring their farmer sources on their blogs or websites. And here's an example of that. Grace Flowers Hawaii on the Big Island of Hawaii is owned by Allison Higgins. She recently posted a story about one of her farm sources, her local sources, Daisy Duke's Flower Farm, which is also a Slow Flowers member. These are things that anyone can do in terms of just educating your customers about your values and your sourcing practices. One of our members in the greater New York City area is called Hometown Flower Company, based on Long Island. Jacqueline Ritigliano is a third-generation florist whose family were conventional florists. When she was growing up, her grandparents owned a brick and mortar flower shop. And then when she was growing up, her parents created a big conventional wedding and event business that worked in all the ballrooms on Long Island. Here comes Jacqueline, third generation, and she reimagines floristry, saying, I want to do something different. I want to focus on local. And so her business has created a map of Long Island showing exactly where their flower farms and partners are extensively along the island. It's really fun at a glance to see this map and realize that this little business is supporting a lot of flower farmers. Back to our Slow Flowers member surveys. We captured florists' increasing desire to go to the source, which is completely disrupting how flowers are sold. We asked florists last year, what percentage of your cut flower purchases are made through farm direct channels? You can see that almost 40% said that it was 76 to 100% of the way they bought flowers. I just want to comment that this trending pattern is exactly one of the reasons why wholesalers are ramping up a focus on locally sourced flowers within their branches, even with signage and labeling to telegraph that they too are working with local florists. This next chart from our 2021 member survey asked, if you purchase from conventional wholesale florists, are you finding more American grown and local options than in the past? 70% of our respondents said yes. So I think this is just something we're going to continue seeing across the board as an encouraging trend line. Value number 4 highlights how we support sustainable and organic farming practices that respect people and the environment. Here's a great example. Front and center on the website for Lamera Gardens, owned by Joan Thorndike, is the message Oregon's Organic Fresh Flower Farm. Joan started Lamera 30 years ago. Long before Slow Flowers was even a term, Joan valued her organic certification. She says, as a mother who always had her children with her on her farm, she wanted them to be safe, but she also wanted her florists and her florist children to be safe and their consumers to be safe and have flowers that were grown organically. We've discussed florists who let their customers know which farms they source from. Joan has flipped this around, and as you can see on this page from her website called Local Florists, she is letting people know, here are the florists who buy my flowers. Please go and patronize them. I love this reciprocity. I also wanted to share this definition from the United Nations about defining sustainability as, and this is super broad, this applies to anything in our lives, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So what does this mean in the floral trade? I love this little sign. I found it years ago on a counter of a florist shop in Portland. We compost all floral cuttings. Just a simple sign with that little language goes a long way to communicate sustainability. This particular florist was located next door to a farm to table restaurant that made a big deal about composting their food waste. So she felt like she wanted to get in on the act, and I'm really seeing that continue with a lot of our members. I just interviewed another one of our members, Foxbound Flowers in Eugene, Oregon, and they actually weigh on a scale their flower waste every single week before putting it into the municipal compost collection. They're trying to document over the course of a year how much flower waste they're composting, taking that extra step and putting in the work, but making sure that all of those cuttings are not going into the landfill but being composted. One of the best ways to teach the values of sustainable flowers and flower farming takes place when consumers and florists can step onto the grounds of a flower farm. We did a report for Johnny Seeds, as we typically contribute to their online newsletter. And this story featured all the ways that farmers are staging on farm events as an education, marketing, and community building tool. I'll share a link to that story in the show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com. Continuing the theme, when flower farms have open days or farm tours, they're nurturing organic in-person connections with their customers. The Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, especially before the COVID shutdown, regularly held open days at their farms throughout the growing season. This is an image taken at Dan's Dahlias in Washington State during a tour. It was on a Sunday. Families were invited. A lot of florists came just for a day of getting out into the country to see where all the flowers that they buy week in and week out are grown. In discussing sustainable flower farming, I wanted to share this slide. On the left, you'll see many of the farming practices. These are practices that farmers are using, but actually a home gardener who's 100% organic like me is using some of these same methods. Of course, I don't plant cover crops. If I had more space, I probably would do that. But this is just a good guide to show what some of the farmers are doing. There are also third-party designations that evaluate sustainable practices. One is called Certified Naturally Grown, which is a peer-to-peer farmer evaluation program that was formed because of trying to work around the rigidity and difficulty of becoming certified through the USDA. Here in the Pacific Northwest, where I am, you'll see the Salmon Safe label on a lot of the flower farms. This is a label that started in the winery industry as a way to telegraph to consumers that whatever enhancements were used in viticulture in terms of like fertilizer or treatments had been designated to be safe for salmon habitat. So the flower farmers at the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market have gone through this evaluation on their farms, and they do it so it's another way to communicate to consumers that they're serious about their sustainable practices. Here we are back at Jello Mold Farm, and this is an image of the high tunnels. I took this during one of the tours when they invited florists to come and see what they do. At Jello Mold, Diane Sukhavati and Dennis Westfall have also hosted floral departments from local grocery stores to come visit their farm so that the staff gain product knowledge and education. And again, that course helps sell more local flowers. This is a fun shot of one of our members, David Brunton of Wright Field Farm in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. Each week, he and his family send an email to their CSA customers. The email tells everyone what's happening on this small family farm, what they're growing, something unique about a particular variety that's available that week, where people can buy their flowers at local natural grocery stores or through the CSA. This highly personalized communication nurtures authentic connections between people and flowers, and I find it completely inspiring. Okay, let's talk about value 5. This value is the newest one that we have added to the Slow Flowers Manifesto. We added it in 2020. And this was an important action in response to our desire to elevate and celebrate Black excellence in the floral profession. Personally, I was inspired by one of my mentors, a Black horticulture professional and friend who I know through the gardening industry. She pointed out that the missing component of sustainability is human sustainability. So if Slow Flowers is proactively supporting environmental sustainability, that's only half of the equation. We have to show that we care as much about representation, inclusion, and equity in the floral industry as we do about environmental sustainability. Value 5 is really important. I'll talk about this in the next several slides. The woman you see here is Mariah Towner. She's the producer of a documentary series called Black Farmer Stories. And Mariah is a frequent contributor to Slow Flowers, providing content. So I love this photo of her in her community garden in Brooklyn. And I just had to show her. So, Slow Flowers is committed to expanding our inclusion, representation, and diversity, including through our partnership with Bloom Imprint, which is the book publishing division that I own with Robin Ovney. Earlier in 2020, we published Black Flora, which was written by Teresa Spate. She's in the photo on the lower left. Oh, excuse me. She's in the photo on the lower right. The book features top farmers and florists across the U.S., top Black flowers and flower farmers and florists across the U.S. who perhaps have not been given the recognition that they deserve. Black Flora amplifies the voices of not only floriculture professionals, but agricultural and horticultural professionals as well. Dee Hall is a flower farmer in Norfolk, Virginia, and you can read her quote from the book. Why is this important to feature Black florists and farmers? When young and emerging floral professionals see someone who looks like them practicing professionally, it sends such an important message about the values that we have to broaden the tent and get as many people as possible into floriculture and horticulture. Dee is, as I said, featured in Black Flora, but she started Black Flower Farmers last year as a community group for specialty cut flower growers across the U.S., and we really want to support this expanding farming collective. This is just a snapshot of some of their members, men and women, people of many ages and many styles, who are really enriching this profession. One of our members, flower farmer Asha Lurie, owns a Patagonia flower farm. She's both a Slow Flowers member as well as active in the Black Flower Farmers group. Asha has created an incredibly vibrant local business in a market that honestly never had local flowers in Tucson, Arizona. So she's really changing people's definition of what's local. When you see that she's growing lisianthus and tulips in the high desert, it's kind of mind-blowing. She's a real leader in the industry. By supporting Black professionals and floral industry leaders and other people of color in the floral industry, we all benefit from connections and shared values. One leader is Valerie Crisostomo. She's an Atlanta-based wedding and event florist, and she started Black Girl Florists in 2020. It's an organization much like Slow Flowers because it's a network. And Black Girl Florists Network is Black florists across the U.S. They become a real important resource for each other and share a unified voice, and we love to support them. Black Girl Florists had their first conference in 2022, including wedding and event professionals, as well as florists and flower farmers. One of the other groups that we love to celebrate has recently emerged on Instagram. It's called Florists of Color, and this is a feed to be celebrated. It's hosted by another Slow Flowers member, Pilar Zuniga, who I introduced to you earlier, and you saw one of the slides of her online flower shop. Pilar is a Latina florist. She's expanding representation to feature Indigenous and Asian and Pacific Islander and other Black and brown florists and flower farmers on this site, just through representation on Instagram. I encourage you to take a moment and support this site and the others that I've discussed, because it will really ensure the growth and sustainability of our profession. Okay, let's wrap up with our last value. Value number 6, to eliminate waste and the use of chemical products in the floral industry. We just have to look at the media coverage around Queen Elizabeth's recent funeral in September to see that the topic of the floral industry waste is global. This is a post from CBC News in September critiquing the amount of plastic wrapping thrown away from all the bouquets that were left at Buckingham Palace and other places to commemorate Queen Elizabeth. Flowers being the right sentiment, of course, and it was probably very good for flower retailers. But the critique of people seeing container loads of plastic cellophane being transported away from the venues and most of which is not recyclable in the plastic waste streams, it was kind of a negative. One of our members, Becky Feesby of Prairie Girl Flowers, who's based in Canada, was quoted in this CBC article questioning if there are other ways that packaging can be changed to reduce the waste of single-use plastic. On a positive note, I think it's really encouraging that there was a lot of coverage about the flowers in the wreath placed on Queen Elizabeth's coffin and the fact that they came from gardens that were important to both her and to King Charles III. I love this sentence. I blew it up here so you can see it. At His Majesty's request, this wreath is made in a totally sustainable way, in a nest of English moss and oak branches, and without the use of floral foam. I think we have Shane Connolly, who created this wreath, to thank for that influence on King Charles III. Increasingly, people are concerned about the single-use plastics in the floral industry. In last year's Slow Flowers member survey, we asked, what percentage of your design work uses alternatives to floral foam? 75% of our respondents said 75% to 100% of their work is foam-free. Next, we asked members to identify the foam-free mechanics that they used. 95% of our respondents identified chicken wire, which of course we all know about. The other top mechanics were pin frogs, hairpin frogs, Holly Chapel's syndicated eggs and cages, chicken wire and moss, taped grids, and other organic mechanics like branches. There is a great organization you'll want to check out called the Sustainable Floristry Network. Founded by Australian florist Rita Feldman, SFN features several of our Slow Flowers members as ambassadors, including Susan McCleary, Becky Feesby, Pilar Zuniga, and Toby Nelson. Slow Flowers has joined on as an advisor. Their statement shown here notes that they hope they run themselves out of business by their advocacy and education in teaching people to reduce their waste and value the planet as much as their floral artistry. Slow Flowers is synonymous with local, seasonal, and sustainable and inclusive floristry and flower farming. Since our origins more than a decade ago, we have been advocating, often quietly and often seen as a fringe element in the marketplace, and now it's so gratifying to see what an influence we have brought to the industry, changing the conversation and bringing our values into the mainstream. Growing your own bouquet is something that we encourage consumers to do. I think everyone who gardens will find the mental health benefits of growing their own flowers. And when that happens, the floral consumer is enlightened and engaged in sustainable issues that relate to our profession, and they're converts and they don't want to go back. You're invited to join us as a supporting member of Slow Flower Society. The websites here will introduce you to much, much more. Thanks so much for joining me today. And you can get this whole PowerPoint deck at our show notes next week at slowflowerspodcast.com for episode 587. Before I go, I want to thank our sponsors who bring this show to you. This show is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 850 shops, studios, and florists who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and to the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. And thank you to our lead sponsor, Farm Girl Flowers. Farm Girl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $10 million of U.S.-grown fresh and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgirlflowers.com. And thank you to Cal Flowers, the leading floral trade association in California, providing valuable transportation and other benefits to flower growers and to the entire floral supply chain in California and 48 other states. The association is a leader in bringing fresh cut flowers to the U.S. market and in promoting the benefits of flowers to new generations of American consumers. Learn more at cafgs.org. Thanks to Store It Cold, creators of the revolutionary CoolBot, a popular solution for flower farmers and studio florists and farmer florists. Save thousands when you build your own walk-in cooler with the CoolBot system and an air conditioner. If you don't have time to build your own, they also have turnkey units available. Learn more at storeitcold.com. And thank you to the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. Formed in 1988, ASCFG was created to educate, unite, and support commercial cut flower growers. Its mission is to help growers produce high quality floral material and to foster and promote the local availability of that product. Learn more at ascfg.org. The Slow Flower Show is a member supported endeavor, and I value our loyal members and supporters. If you're new to our weekly show or our long running podcast, check out all of our resources at slowflowersociety.com and consider making a donation to sustain Slow Flower's ongoing advocacy, education, and outreach activities. You can find the donate button in the column to the right at slowflowerspodcast.com. I'm Debra Prinzing, host and producer of The Slow Flowers Show and The Slow Flowers Podcast. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one stem, one vase at a time. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll see you next week.